Jung once said that what is repressed in the unconscious does not simply disappear, it waits, it gathers, and eventually, it returns. The hidden revenge of empaths who refuse to be used is not cruelty, nor vengeance in the usual sense. It is the silent power of withdrawal, the force of becoming untouchable when every last thread of exploitation has been cut. This, Jung discovered, is not just a personal defense mechanism, it is the psyche's own rebellion, the unconscious demanding balance after years of being drained. And when it happens, it is as if a dormant storm finally awakens. Today, I'll take you inside that storm, into the shadowed realm where empaths, often praised for their endless giving, confront the terrifying moment when their soul whispers enough. What begins as exhaustion becomes something more, an alchemical transformation that Jung would call individuation, but which feels, in lived reality, like revenge against the very structures and people that once used their light. Imagine an empath, gentle and selfless, always the healer in their family, always the one to forgive the unforgivable. Jung observed in his patients that the psyche can endure only so much repression of rage, so much denial of its own instincts, before something snaps. That snap is rarely explosive. It is quieter, colder, more devastating. The empath disappears. They refuse to play the role anymore, and to the abuser, this sudden absence feels like annihilation. It is the revenge of silence, of detachment, of refusing to be consumed any longer. You may have felt this. Perhaps you tolerated betrayal, manipulation, or exploitation for years. You gave chances. You rationalized. You told yourself that patience was love, that endurance was virtue. But deep within, your unconscious was keeping score. Jung called this the shadow, all the disowned feelings you tried to suppress. And when the shadow bursts through, it does not ask for permission. It reclaims its voice, its anger, its boundaries. What once seemed like weakness becomes a fortress. What once felt like endless compassion becomes a sharpened clarity. I will not be used. Consider the story of a woman Jung treated, though details shift in translation. The essence remains. She was the caregiver of her entire household, the vessel of sympathy for her husband's indifference and her children's demands. For years, she was admired for her resilience, her capacity to endure. But in her dreams, violent images appeared, storms tearing through houses, wolves circling outside, her hands stained with fire. Jung knew these were not random. They were messages from her unconscious, demanding recognition of her buried rage. And when she finally stopped serving, when she walked away, the family was left shattered. To them, it felt like betrayal. To her, it was salvation. The unconscious had demanded balance, and she had answered. If you look closely at your own life, you will see where this energy gathers. The late-night resentment, the silent fantasies of escape, the secret wish that someone, anyone, would finally notice your pain. Jung believed these were not weaknesses to suppress, but signals pointing toward individuation, the process of becoming whole. And for the empath, individuation often requires refusing to be the sacrifice any longer. It is not about punishing others. It is about rescuing yourself. But make no mistake, to those who depended on your endless giving, your transformation feels like revenge. They do not see your exhaustion, your breakdowns, your tears. They only see the sudden absence of their supply, and they call it betrayal. They call it selfishness. They call it cruel. Yet in truth, it is justice. The psyche restores balance by demanding that what was taken without respect must no longer be given. Picture this as an alchemical process. The empath's suffering is the blackened stage, the nigredo, when all light seems extinguished. But within that darkness, transformation brews. The fire of resentment, the weight of silence, the dream of escape, all are ingredients in the crucible of the soul. And when the moment comes, when the empath withdraws and reclaims their life, it is the gold that emerges. Individuation, selfhood, the courage to exist without being consumed. And so the hidden revenge of the empath is not in striking back. It is in no longer being available to strike. It is the mirror they hold up to the exploiter, who suddenly sees their own emptiness reflected back. Jung warned that such confrontations with the shadow are terrifying not because of what we do to others, but because of what we finally acknowledge in ourselves. The empath, once terrified of being selfish, discovers that boundaries are sacred, that saying no is a form of divine justice. And once discovered, this cannot be undone. So ask yourself, where are you still being used? Where do you still silence your inner voice in the name of harmony? Where does your own shadow wait, pressing at the edges of your dreams? The answer is not in revenge as the world defines it, but in the deeper revenge of becoming whole. For when you refuse to be consumed, you no longer participate in the cycle of exploitation. And that withdrawal, silent, sovereign, absolute, is the most devastating act of all. There is a silence more powerful than any scream. Jung noticed that when the empath finally withdraws, when they refuse to keep offering their soul as nourishment, the silence they leave behind becomes deafening to those who fed on them. And yet, for the empath, this silence is not empty, it is fertile. It is the ground where the true self begins to rise, no longer shackled by the endless obligation to heal others at the cost of one's own life. In Jung's writings, he described the archetype of the wounded healer. The empath embodies this, carrying pain from their earliest years, often molded in families where love was conditional, where harmony depended on absorbing the chaos of others. As children, many empaths became what Jung would call the parentified child, stepping into roles that were never theirs to carry. They learned early that safety came not from expressing their own needs, but from anticipating the needs of others. This is the seed of their gift and also their curse. Think of it like this. An empath's sensitivity is like a mirror made of water. Every ripple of emotion around them disturbs their own surface. They feel the anger unspoken, the grief hidden behind smiles, the hunger for attention that others conceal. And for years, they reflect it, absorb it, transmute it. But in Jung's framework, this constant outward orientation is incomplete. The unconscious begins to rebel, whispering through symptoms fatigue, anxiety, inexplicable resentment, dreams of drowning or being chased. These are the psyche's alarms, warning that too much of the self has been abandoned. Let me take you deeper into a story, one drawn from Jung's clinic, and one that mirrors countless modern lives. A man, gentle by nature, came to Jung with chronic exhaustion. He was praised by colleagues as the one who always stayed late, who took burdens no one else wanted. His family leaned on him for everything, though he confessed quietly that he felt invisible. His dreams revealed a striking pattern in one. He was carrying a massive cross through a city while people cheered. But when he collapsed, they stepped over him as if he were nothing. Jung saw immediately that this was the myth of the sacrifice the Christ archetype distorted. The man had become a martyr to everyone's needs. Yet his unconscious was screaming rebellion. In the weeks that followed, he began to refuse certain requests. The moment he did, the world around him erupted with accusations he was selfish, changed, cold. But Jung understood this was not cruelty. This was individuation. The man was reclaiming the self that had been crucified under duty. If you are an empath, You know this crucible. You know the quiet despair of realizing your kindness has become currency, spent without gratitude. You know the ache of being surrounded by people yet feeling unseen. And you know, perhaps in secret, the longing to disappear, to walk away and never return. Jung would not call this madness. He would call it the shadow of your unlived life demanding recognition. For every time you said yes against your soul, a fragment of yourself slipped into the unconscious, waiting to be retrieved. The revenge is not against others, it is against the lie that your life must be sacrificed to prove your worth. This is the paradox. The empath's deepest fear is being abandoned. Yet the way they heal is by daring to abandon the roles that consumed them, to stand alone, to confront the void. Jung described individuation as a descent into the abyss of the unconscious, a confrontation with death itself, yet always, hidden in the abyss, is the seed of new life. When you, as an empath, withdraw from being used, you are enacting this myth. You are not simply protecting yourself, you are stepping into the archetypal journey of death and rebirth. You die to the false self, the persona of the eternal giver, and you are reborn as the sovereign soul. But the cost is real. Jung warned that every transformation requires sacrifice. When the empath withdraws, they often lose relationships that once defined their lives. Friends may vanish, family may turn cold, lovers may lash out. To those who fed on your giving, your absence feels like betrayal, and so the empath must face the crucifixion of their old identity. This is why Jung insisted that individuation is not comfortable, it is tragic, but it is also liberating. For in losing what was false, you gain what is real. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this: you are standing at the edge of a vast mirror. You lean forward, and instead of your familiar reflection, you see every face you have ever served. Parents, partners, friends, strangers, all looking back, demanding, then slowly, one by one, they fade, until only you remain, not the persona, not the healer, not the savior, just you, raw, uncertain, but free. This is the moment of transformation Jung spoke of, when the self, long buried, finally stands unveiled. And here lies the hidden revenge. For those who once exploited you, your withdrawal exposes their dependency. They must now face their own shadows, their own emptiness, their own lack of wholeness. The empath, in refusing to be used, forces the exploiter into confrontation with themselves. And though this may look like punishment, it is something far more profound. It is the unconscious balancing the scales of justice. So the journey continues. The empath's silence is not an ending, it is a threshold. It is the beginning of a life no longer defined by being drained. It is the first breath of sovereignty. Jung's discovery was that such thresholds are the essence of individuation. You are not meant to be endlessly selfless. You are meant to become whole, and wholeness requires shadow, fire, and the courage to walk away. Jung believed that the psyche speaks in symbols because words alone are too fragile to carry the weight of truth. And so, when the empath begins to awaken, the unconscious often delivers images both haunting and profound: locked doors, empty wells, wild animals stalking in the night. These are not random, they are maps. They tell you that the doors you once left open for others must now be shut, that the well of your giving has run dry, that the predator you feared in others is now rising within you as your own instinct for survival. One patient of Jung's dreamt repeatedly of a house she was tending. The house was full of visitors, demanding, restless, endlessly spilling wine and tearing furniture. In her dream, she scrubbed floors, cleaned dishes, smiled through exhaustion. But one night, the dream shifted. She stood outside, and the house burned to the ground. At first, she panicked, horrified at the destruction. Yet, as the smoke cleared, she noticed a garden blooming where the ashes lay. Jung explained that this dream revealed the psyche's rebellion against her role as caretaker. The burning of the house was not tragedy, it was liberation. The hidden revenge of the empath was not the fire itself, but the freedom it made possible. For you, too, the dreams arrive. Perhaps you have visions of losing everything, of falling into water, of standing at a crossroads. These images can terrify because they echo what Jung called the death of the old self. Yet within each symbol lies a secret. What feels like death is the beginning of individuation. To walk away, to refuse to be used, is to allow something larger to emerge. But here is where the paradox deepens. The empath's withdrawal does not always appear dramatic to the outside world. Sometimes it is subtle, a conversation where you finally say, "No, I can't do this for you anymore." A family gathering where you no longer absorb the tension, but let it hang in the air. A relationship where your silence no longer rushes to smooth over conflict. These moments are small on the surface, but to those around you, they feel seismic. The energy they once took without resistance is no longer there. It is like trying to drink from a well that has gone dry. They call this betrayal, but Jung would call it balance restored. This balance is the justice of the unconscious. The empath does not seek revenge, they seek survival. And yet, the consequence for others is unavoidable. They must now face themselves. Without your constant buffering, their anger has no place to land but back in their own hands. Without your endless forgiveness, their guilt rises to the surface. Without your availability, their emptiness becomes unbearable. This is why the empath's refusal to be used feels so devastating to others. It forces the unconscious material of the exploiter to emerge. And this, Jung would insist, is why individuation is not only personal, it is collective. When you, as an empath, refuse to be consumed, you are not only liberating yourself, you are forcing a ripple effect in the entire system around you. Families restructure, friendships dissolve or transform, workplaces shift. Every time you break the cycle of being used, you shine a light into the collective shadow. And though it may not feel like it in the moment, your courage becomes a kind of medicine. Still, the journey is not without cost. Many empaths who walk this path experience profound loneliness at first. To withdraw is to lose familiar roles, identities, even relationships. The silence of freedom can feel like exile. Jung warned that every individuation carries a period of isolation, when the old world no longer fits and the new world has not yet appeared. In myth, this is the hero wandering the desert, the initiate lost in the labyrinth, the alchemist locked in the sealed vessel of transformation. The temptation in this stage is to return, to re-enter the old cycle for comfort. But the unconscious does not allow backward steps. The door once shut cannot be reopened. It is here that the empath discovers the self, the archetype at the center of Jung's psychology. The self is not the persona, not the mask you wear to please others. It is not the shadow alone, nor the wounds of childhood. It is the wholeness that contains all opposites, compassion and rage, giving and withholding, love and boundary. The hidden revenge of the empath is that by refusing to be consumed, they become whole, and wholeness cannot be manipulated. Picture yourself standing in front of a mirror again, but this time, when you look, you do not see the reflection of all those you served. You see your own face lit by fire and shadow both, and behind you, no longer a house filled with others, but a vast open field. It is terrifying, yes, but also exhilarating. This is sovereignty. This is individuation. And so the empath's revenge is never loud. It is never vindictive. It is the quiet and irreversible declaration, "I will not be used." This declaration changes everything. It cuts ties not with cruelty, but with clarity. It reclaims time, energy, and identity. And it awakens a power that no manipulator can touch, the power of a self that has finally chosen to live. Jung would tell us that to refuse to be used is not selfishness. It is alignment with the deepest law of the psyche that life must grow toward wholeness. And when you step into this truth, you not only save yourself, you become an invitation for others to face their own shadows. There comes a moment in every empath's life when the silence inside them becomes louder than the noise around them. Jung would have called this the turning point of individuation, when the unconscious demands not only recognition, but action. The empath can no longer pretend. The mask of endless patience cracks. The persona of selflessness dissolves. And in that rupture, a new figure rises, the sovereign self, fierce in its clarity. This is the hidden revenge of the empath, not retaliation, not cruelty, but sovereignty. A sovereignty that unsettles those who once depended on their compliance. Imagine a fortress, once with gates wide open, welcoming all who entered. Over time, the fortress was plundered, its resources drained, its walls eroded by constant invasion. But one day, without warning, the gates close. The walls are rebuilt with stone and fire, and those who once walked freely inside are left outside, pounding at doors that no longer yield. To them, this feels like betrayal, but to the fortress, it is survival. Jung encountered this fortress building again and again in his work. He wrote that the psyche, when it has been wounded too deeply by exploitation, naturally seeks protection in symbols of boundaries, dreams of walls, locked chests, mountains, and caves. One patient dreamt of building a tower on an island, unreachable by bridges. Jung recognized this as a symbol of individuation, the psyche reclaiming its sacred space after years of invasion. For the empath, such dreams are not fantasies, they are blueprints for the soul's rebirth. But here lies a deeper truth. The empath's withdrawal does more than protect, it transforms. In Jung's language, this is the alchemical stage of albedo, the whitening, where after the blackened chaos of suffering, a new clarity dawns. When the empath refuses to be used, they discover a startling gift: their sensitivity, once a curse, becomes a compass. No longer hijacked by others' needs, it turns inward, guiding them toward their own depths. They begin to hear the subtle voice of the self, the voice that whispers, "You are not here to be consumed. You are here to become whole." And yet, this rebirth does not come without shadows. Jung warned that every individuation must pass through confrontation with the unconscious, where old wounds and suppressed rage rise to the surface. For the empath, this often feels like a flood of anger they never allowed themselves to feel. They may dream of violence, of storms, of fire. These are not signs of corruption, but of healing. The shadow, once denied, is now embraced. And in this embrace, power returns. I recall Jung's account of a woman who dreamt of stabbing an intruder in her home. She awoke horrified, believing herself monstrous. But Jung reassured her the dream was not about murder, it was about reclaiming agency. The intruder symbolized the people who drained her. The act of violence symbolized her unconscious, declaring, "You have the right to defend yourself." For empaths, these dreams are common, and they are crucial. They mark the moment when the soul begins to insist on boundaries, not as cruelty, but as necessity. To live without being used is to enter what Jung called the middle passage of life. Here, the empath must confront loneliness, guilt, and the temptation to return to old roles. Families will protest, friends will withdraw, manipulators will rage. But the empath's hidden revenge is their refusal to bend. Their silence, their absence, their unavailability, all of it forces others to meet themselves. And though painful, this is how transformation ripples outward. Now imagine yourself in this passage. You are walking through a dark forest at night. Behind you, voices call familiar, demanding, pleading. Ahead, only silence. You hesitate, heart pounding, tempted to turn back. But then you notice a faint light ahead, flickering like a lantern. That light is yourself. And though the journey is lonely, every step you take toward it is a step away from being used. The empath's revenge, then, is not in destroying others, it is in refusing to destroy themselves for others. It is a refusal so profound that it reshapes destinies. Jung would say that in this moment, the empath steps into their archetypal role not as healer, but as sovereign. The healer serves, the sovereign chooses. The healer absorbs, the sovereign protects. The healer bends, the sovereign stands. And when the empath becomes sovereign, no manipulator can hold power over them again. But the cost must always be acknowledged. Jung never romanticized individuation. He knew it was a path of fire and sacrifice. For the empath, the cost is often the shattering of old identities. No longer the good child, the perfect partner, the loyal friend. Those masks crumble. And with them, illusions die. To the world, the empath may now appear distant, cold, even ruthless. But within, something greater takes root: authenticity. And authenticity, Jung believed, is the rarest and most dangerous gift a human being can embody. You may feel the echoes of this within you now. The guilt of stepping back, the anger of years wasted, the loneliness of no longer belonging to the roles that once defined you. And yet, beneath it all, a quiet strength stirs. A whisper, I am still here, and I am mine. This is the self announcing itself. This is the soul's declaration of sovereignty. So the empath's hidden revenge is not vengeance at all. It is resurrection. It is the silent fire of becoming untouchable, unmanipulable, unbroken. It is the moment when you, who once gave without end, finally give to yourself. Jung taught that every true transformation ends not with destruction, but with integration. The empath's hidden revenge, then, is not simply leaving behind those who used them. It is something greater, reclaiming all the pieces of themselves they once abandoned. It is gathering the fragments of the shadow, the silenced voice, the buried anger, the forgotten joy, and weaving them back into a soul that no longer leaks its power away. This is the final movement of individuation, the moment when the empath no longer defines themselves by wounds, roles, or betrayals, but by wholeness. Jung compared it to alchemy's last stage, the rubedo, when the gold finally emerges from the furnace. The empath who once feared boundaries now wields them as sacred. The empath who once drowned in others' emotions now sails upon them with mastery. The empath who once vanished in self-sacrifice now stands radiant, not in service of exploitation, but in service of the self. But this rebirth is not abstract. It is lived in the smallest details of life. It is in the quiet, no spoken without explanation. It is in the decision to rest rather than rescue. It is in the courage to love without losing oneself. Jung believed the self is not an ideal we strive toward, it is the reality we uncover when the masks fall. And for the empath, the greatest revenge is finally living from that reality. Let me tell you of one last case, one that captures the full circle of this journey. A man came to Jung after decades of servitude to his family, his workplace, his community. He was praised as saintly, yet inside he felt hollow. His dreams told the truth, images of skeletons carrying burdens, of his heart locked in chains, of a child crying behind a closed door. Jung guided him to see that the child was himself, abandoned so that others could thrive. Slowly, painfully, he began to change. He stopped overgiving. He distanced himself from those who drained him. At first, the backlash was fierce accusations, isolation, even hatred. But then, something shifted. In his dreams, the child reappeared, this time laughing, this time free. The man described waking with tears, realizing that for the first time in his life, he belonged to himself. This, Jung said, was individuation fulfilled. And here lies the truth for you, too. The revenge of the empath is not against others. It is against the lie that love must mean sacrifice, that compassion must mean exploitation, that to be good you must be consumed. The revenge is simply this: to live, fully, fiercely, unapologetically. To those who once drained you, this feels like abandonment. But in reality, it is an initiation. It forces them to confront their own shadows, their own emptiness, their own need for growth. Whether they accept that initiation is their choice, but your task is complete. You have broken the cycle. You have become sovereign. Now imagine yourself standing in the center of a vast circle of mirrors. Each mirror reflects not the faces of those who once used you, but versions of yourself: child, healer, warrior, sovereign. You step forward, and one by one, the mirrors merge, until only one remains, the whole self, radiant, complete. This is you, not the fragments, not the roles, not the wounds. You, and no one can use you again, because you belong fully to yourself. This is why Jung's discoveries remain dangerous even today, because they free us from the chains of unconscious repetition. They show us that love without boundaries is not love, that healing without self-care is poison, that compassion without sovereignty is exploitation. When the empath refuses to be used, they do not only liberate themselves, they liberate generations to come. Children witness it, communities feel it. The collective unconscious shifts. And so the hidden revenge of the empath is not only silence, not only absence, not only sovereignty, it is legacy. It is the knowledge that by refusing to be consumed, you have opened a path where wholeness is possible for yourself and for all who follow. If you recognize yourself in this journey, comment, "I reclaim my sovereignty." Your healing is not only your liberation, but a torch for humanity's awakening. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.